Senator Whelan, John Whelan.
Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach, and welcome the Minister to the House. And I know she's here to represent the Minister for Health, Mr. Leo Varadkar. And my request this morning, Minister, is very simple. It's to ask the Minister for Health, Leo Varadkar, to sit down and to meet the parents of the narcolepsy victims, the parents of the children who have contracted this terrible affliction and this terrible lifelong disease as a result of a state-sponsored vaccination programme. Now, I can't understand for the world of me why the Minister cannot, at the earliest opportunity. This has gone on for 5 years now, and it's incumbent upon the Minister, on behalf of the state and the citizens and the government, to sit down with the parents. They have a support group called SOUND, representing sufferers of unique narcolepsy disorder. And they contracted this affliction, and this lifelong affliction and disease, which will hamper and damage their quality of life and their health for the rest of their lives. That's bad enough that that has happened. That's a terrible tragedy. However, it is definitely to compound the problem and to add insult to injury, to refuse to meet the parents and to refuse to live up to our responsibilities and obligations to these children, to support them today, to support them tomorrow and for the rest of their lives. In fact, Minister, I'm appalled to report to the House that families have been threatened by elements within the department and the HSE that if they countenance legal action, the meagre supports that have been there for them will be withdrawn. Now, who is representing that position? It's certainly not our position. Who would dare to do that to a child? What is happening now, Minister, and I'm forecasting and predicting that the state is sleepwalking itself into the nightmare of a protracted legal cases, a queue of them which are now queuing up for the High Court. The parents and the children do not want to be in the High Court. But the HSE and the Department of Health are now washing their hands of this, and they have deferred it over and offered it over to the State Claims Board. And they never seem to want to sit down and discuss and settle. They seem to want and favour litigation. As we have seen time and time again on the 6 o'clock news, children wheeled out after 4, 5, 6 and up to 10 years in the courts, instead of supporting them and spending the money helping them and supporting them in their lives and their medical care and their education and their quality of life. No, we'd rather pay millions to barristers to drag it out for a decade, and very often the help and the compensation by the time it comes is useless and pointless, and more damage has been done. Minister, I am saying to you now that the government and the department and the minister have to intervene, because we cannot have children dragged through the courts unnecessarily. There is no need for this. We administered this vaccine. It was a blanket vaccination when it shouldn't have been. It should have been a targeted one. We went then and made a second strategic error when the HSE indemnified SmithKline-Glaxo from any responsibility, landing the full burden on the taxpayer of the state, Cathaoirleach. So the liability is established. That is beyond dispute. What we need to do, instead of dragging children through the courts and instead of running up a bill on the taxpayer of tens of millions over years, because there are now 70 cases filed and it could run up to 100. We have a responsibility and a moral obligation to these families and to these children. I'm ashamed to say we've any part, hand, act or otherwise in this approach and this strategy. Why are we going to the State Claims Board with this? There is nothing in dispute, and all the parents and the children want, in some instances, Minister, a simple thing like a medical card, so that they don't have to worry about the cost of medical care, education support and also lifelong assistance. This is a lifelong affliction, a burden from which they will never ever be free of. Had they contracted swine flu, Cathaoirleach, they would have been better by now. This was a terrible mistake. We should learn from our mistakes. This is the hepatitis C scandal ready to play out all over again. And we should not add to the trauma and distress of these families and these children. We all know if it was any of our children, the terrible burden it would be. We must, the Minister, I implore him, I implore Leo Varadkar at the earliest juncture to meet with the parent support group sound and to nip this in the bud, to bring common sense to play instead of resorting to the courts. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. Call the Minister Whelan now, please. Respond.
Thank you, Senator Whelan, for raising this very important issue, and I have constituents myself who suffer from this condition, I suppose. Now, the Senator will understand I am taking this on behalf of Minister Leo Varadkar, but I will undertake to take your concerns about meeting the support group. As I said, I'm taking this debate on behalf of my colleague, the Minister for Health. I want to thank the Senator Whelan for raising this issue. It provides me with an opportunity to update the House on this matter. Minister Varadkar has consistently acknowledged the impact narcolepsy has both physically and emotionally on the lives of those affected and on their families. He is aware of 73 people with narcolepsy who received the pandemic vaccine. They can experience excessive daytime sleeplessness, sudden and temporary loss of muscle tone, intense, vivid and sometimes terrifying hallucinations and sleep paralysis. Dealing day to day with this illness affects not just their lives but also those of their entire family. Immunisation is a simple, safe and effective way of protecting people against certain diseases. Immunisation against infectious disease has saved more lives than any other public health intervention. In spite of the obvious benefits that come from vaccination, there can be serious adverse outcomes for some people. The priority for the Minister for Health and the priority of the HSE is that individuals and families affected in such an adverse way by vaccinations receive appropriate health care and supports. The Department of Health, the HSE and Department of Education and Skills have worked together to provide a range of services and support for people who were diagnosed with narcolepsy after receiving the pandemic vaccine on an ex gratia basis. These services and supports, which are coordinated by the HSE National Advocacy Unit, are intended to provide tailored assistance to address their individual requirements. The HSE regional coordinators for narcolepsy liaise with primary care services and hospitals to help narcolepsy patients access the health and services they require. Where services are not available in the community, the regional coordinators assist narcolepsy patients and their families in identifying private service providers. They also liaise with schools and with special education section in the Department of Education regarding assessments and supports. I understand that the HSE continues to meet with Sound and recently updated them on the development of a Centre of Excellence at St James's Hospital. The centre will include a nurse specialist, dietary service and will facilitate the transition from child to adult services. Legal action has been initiated by 26 families alleging personal injury, in which they are claiming the development of narcolepsy resulted from the administration of the pandemic vaccine. I am sure you will understand that it would be inappropriate for me to comment further on these cases. Finally, I wish to again acknowledge the impact on the lives of these people and families affected by narcolepsy and reiterate the Minister for Health's commitment to the ongoing provision of appropriate services and supports.
I know that you're here on behalf of the Minister for Health, who I also believe himself to be a sound man and a fair man. However, I think the reply is not satisfactory because there is no indication in it whatsoever that the Minister will meet the support group Sound. I think he should. I think his intervention could be very fruitful for the parents, for the children, for their families, for their siblings, but also for the state. To save the state the shame and humiliation that will surely be visited upon them for dragging these families through the courts. And now what I read in this Cathaoirleach is that the HSE are going to earth saying, well, once cases have been filed. But there is still an opportunity to stop this going to court. It needn't go to court, and the 26 cases are only the tip of the iceberg. There will be more, but there's no need for this to go to court if common sense and fairness applied. This should be stopped now. The only people who will benefit from this process are barristers, instead of us looking after children.
Thank you. I think you made your point.